Hi.
Good morning, Emily Miller.
Good morning, Kate Richburg.
How
Your
are
ringer's
you?
off, mine ringer's off.
That's right. So
make sure my sound is down
we're
on
all
my
set.
computer.
That's right.
Eek.
Well, good morning and welcome to Wednesday Facebook Live.
Yep.
With beadshop.com.
Yep.
Today.
Kate and Emily.
That's right.
Ethel and Lucy.
That's right. Whatever they like to call
What was
us.
I going to say the other
right.
one? Oh,
I don't remember. Oh no, it'll come to you.
Yeah, sorry.
Grandma, it'll
Laverne
come
and
to
Shirley.
you. Laverne and Shirley. That's right. Totally. Antony and Cleopatra. Oh
No,
wait,
no,
it's a
no.
little different. What are you gonna do?
Edith and Archie?
Right, that one. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Alrighty. Well, I am super excited about Wire today. I'm so excited. I'm going to start drinking my coffee.
I hope you like your coffee. I know I made it a little bit strong. I'm sorry.
I like it strong. It's
too,
perfect.
Strong coffee, strong men.
Oh, what are you going to do?
Right?
That's right. Strong woman.
That's right.
That's right. So, Em, we've got a lot to cover today. We're going to get into that in just a few.
Can we talk about what we did last weekend?
I was just going to say,
that was
because I know
the most fun ever.
a lot of you in our group, The Bead Table, our Facebook group over there, we had some really fun times, and we posted a whole bunch of photos from that as well.
Yeah.
We had so much fun.
We went to the yarn show, which is kind of like the bead show, but yarn.
Yes, and it's called Stitches.
Stitches.
And Stitches goes all over the country.
Yeah, so there's one in Texas, there's one in...
There's like Stitches East, West, I don't know.
North,
there's
Central, I don't know.
There's one in SoCal.
Yeah.
But it was
that's
really,
right, there's a SoCal
There
one.
is.
Yep.
But it was really fun. We had such a good time.
We went with our friend Tanya.
We did.
And Tanya is a mad knitter and beater. She's actually extremely talented.
So talented, and her color...
her color eyes.
Yeah, you can... Tanya Skivos, you can follow her on Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's really great.
Yeah.
She has such a great eye for color. But the three of us went, and it's tradition. Some of you saw, you're like, what are you guys wearing? Well, we'll tell you. We had so much fun. Some of you guys commented on it. We did a little craft, because, I like to call us omni-crafters.
Absolutely.
Right? Because not only do we bead, but we knit, we do sew and
all kinds
spin
of
and weave and all those things.
You weave, you spin.
Tat.
You tat.
Do you quill?
I don't quill.
What?
How
is it that you don't quill?
I like it in
even
theory,
with metal
but
clay?
Not even with metal clay.
Oh, huh.
I don't know why.
I've quilled.
Yeah.
It's, not that exciting, but it's
I like to do block
quilling.
printing.
Yeah.
I like to do dyeing.
Dyeing, yes.
I do
a
a
lot
bunch
of
of those
fabric
things.
dyeing.
Yeah.
Yes, we've done it together.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. But we went and we made these cute little things. Punch needle
pieces.
Yeah.
And it's so fun, and it is so... this is the third year in a row that we've done it, so we
is.
pretty much teach the class.
Yeah, it's kind of like our little tradition. We get there and we're like, let's go sign up for our punch needle stuff.
Yeah, so we went and made these little... The last couple of years, we've had these as little mug rugs.
Yeah.
So like a coaster, right, for your coffee cup.
Right, so we can do that.
And this year, they gave us this very clever magnet name tag attachment. So it's stuck onto the back.
Yeah, look at how cute they are.
And then that just goes like right on there.
This is what the kids are doing now for name tags.
Well, it's nice because it doesn't put holes in your clothing.
Yeah, it was really fun. So they made them in little brooches, which I thought were really cute. I want to make it into a little... I always want to put, like Karen, I always want to put things on my head. They could be like little ears. Like if I could have little...
The Mickey
I don't
Mouse
know.
ears?
Yeah, I don't know if we can say that even.
Well, too late. I did already.
Yeah, things that one might wear at Disneyland. I don't know.
Well, I think you can say it as long as you're not...
As long as you're not making it.
Right.
I mean, or infringing upon it.
Right.
Well, so we had such a good time, and we really, I don't know, I really recommend, jumping in and flexing your omni-crafter muscle.
I was so impressed by how many people were doing locally grown wool. So sheep that were local, and then the wool is spun, and then it's dyed. And there were so many people dyeing their own stuff this time. Yeah. It really, I think it outstripped the number of companies that were there.
And with natural dyes.
Big companies.
Yeah, natural dyes is a big one. We can give a shout out to our buddies across the bay, A Verb for Keeping Warm.
Verb for Keeping Warm
is
there.
They're small, locally here to the Bay Area, woman-owned business. They do a lot of great dyeing. They do classes on dyeing. They also do, Christine wrote a book on natural dyeing. So it's called A Verb for Keeping Warm. over in the East Bay in Oakland, California. And they're great, and give them a little shout out.
Yeah, they're really a lot of fun. They have a lot of small batch folks within their company as well.
Yeah.
That they promote.
Yeah. So it's kind of like our fiber sisters.
Yeah.
Over on the other side of the bay, which is awesome. Because as you know, we are also a small, locally owned, woman-owned business. Yes. So that's right. Bead Sisters Unite.
Well,
right, Janice?
You know, it is nice to work with a small company for sure.
It is.
And all those other benefits. The money stays local and all that good stuff.
It is. So a big shout out to, it's cool to go to a place like Stitches to see a huge national convention and see kind of things on a smaller scale.
Well, and to see that at a national convention, it was mostly small people.
Yeah, yeah.
There was a place called Yarn on the House, Yoth, Y-O-T-H.
Oh, right. I love their yarn.
And that's a brother and sister.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Yeah, I bought a pattern from them, and then I kind of started reading a little bit more about them on their website.
That's so cool.
And it was really nice. She started the company. She asked her brother to help her.
Oh, isn't that awesome?
And so they're partners in their business.
That's great.
And their mom works there, and their dad builds the displays.
I love that part. I love that story.
And they had a beautiful, really spectacular booth.
Yeah, their booth is really beautiful. Yeah. Well, we, it's kind of the same thing in the bead world. You know, you think about on the other side of wherever you're ordering from, there are a lot of larger companies that are out there, but beadshop.com, we are a smaller company, and it's cool.
Doing big things.
Yeah, doing big things, which is great. Thanks to you guys. Thank you to you guys.
Absolutely.
So we have a couple of things that we want to go over before we jump in. Just to let you guys know, when you're watching us live, we thank you very much for watching us live on Wednesdays. We love to have you. But if you watch us on the replay, there are several ways you can watch us on the replay. Again, right here on our Facebook page, beadshop.com. You can also go to our YouTube channel under Beadshop. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you'll get notifications when our regular Wednesday show and our Friday Free Tip Friday drop. And then you can also go to our website, beadshop.com, and beadshop.com carries all the stuff that we're using today, as well as we have a special section dedicated to all of our Facebook Lives, and you can just go there and watch them all the way back to Facebook Live #1. So it's a really, really good resource. Also, if you kind of want to miss the chit chat that Emily and I do at the beginning, we can't help. We tried, and we've got things to go over too. We've got messages to convey, words to a new. I don't know. Whatever.
It's not happening.
Anyway, it's not happening. So you can go forward about 15 minutes. Slide that little slider over to the 15-minute mark. If you're watching this later, make sure and go over to our Facebook, to our website, beadshop.com. You can also download the episode notes for each episode, and Drea and Janice work on those. And Drea puts in the little minute marker where all of the learning and stuff happens. So if you haven't jumped on there for the episode notes, let me tell you, they are great.
If we had you all sitting around the bead table here in Redwood City, and we were teaching you, one of the first things we would do when we set up the classroom would be to put a handout in front of each of you for you to look out during class and afterwards.
That's right.
Most importantly for afterwards. But Drea and Janice have taken on that duty of
it's like writing a term paper. It's writing a term paper
every week
with notes and citing resources. It's crazy. They write their dissertation every week, and Drea now has taken over a real majority of the episode notes, and she does such a great job. And so all of the stuff, like in this week's episode notes, we'll link to all the stuff we talked about, and we'll link over to our little friends across the East Bay that we, our yarn friends, and our, all the stuff that we talk about. So it's really a super resource for you. But it is, Emily. It's like your little handout.
It is.
Yep.
And I personally would not really teach a class without a handout. I want you to have something to take home after class to refer to. I can actually even think of it as a place for you to write some notes on too.
Yeah.
Handout is sort of like a good cookbook. It should give you all the recipe and all the reminders about how to do things, but it should also be stained and spattered with cookie dough and
sauce.
Pancake mix.
Sauce. I like a sauce.
And a little smear of Red on the edge where you cut your thumb and you have to turn the page.
Oh, God. sauce.
But it should have all those things on it, as you work. Don't think that the handout is something that's super pristine or that should stay
it's a working
untouched.
document.
It's a working document, and I was really encouraged this week as I was looking over the Facebook Live group, to starting to see Faye, the shout out for Faye, to starting to see some people taking kind of our projects and running with them.
Yeah.
So taking on what we've shown and not duplicating it exactly, which is fine. If you want to, that's fine too. But to take what you've learned and move along with it.
Yeah, and start to interpret it to your
for your own self.
Yeah, for your aesthetic and your design.
Because this is kind of where I came from with this particular project too.
Well, before we get started on this project, I wanted to give a couple of shout outs for stuff that's coming up. We are going to be doing, Janice and I, as you guys know, are going to be teaching at Bead and Button this year. And I'm doing my soldering class, and then Janice and I are doing the color study class, and we're doing the treasure chest bracelet class. And if you go to beadandbutton.com and you go over to the classes, signups are going on now. So our classes are filling. It's awesome. We do have some spaces left, so we'd love to see you. So if you are going to Bead and Button in Milwaukee this year, it's our classes are on June 8th and 9th, but the Bead and Button is going on all that week. We're also going to do a beadshop.com meetup there. Those details will be forthcoming. We're also going to do a meetup at Beadfest like we did last year. So Beadfest this year is August 15th through 19th. And we'll probably...
Is Philly already coming around again?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
I think I had to do Facebook Live without you guys that one time.
That's
you guys
right.
were in Philly, and it was...
You were. I just submitted all my classes, so those will be up on the website soon. I'm doing a host of course, metalsmithing classes, but Janice and I, and hopefully Drea, you'll be there with us like you were last year. We'll probably do a meetup on that Saturday the 18th, so there'll be more info on that. Classes aren't posted yet on the Beadfest website, but they should be soon.
I would imagine.
I haven't gotten my notifications yet, but we'll let you know as soon as we know. Then we've got a couple of things going on locally here. Janice, you are going to be hosting a meetup. I don't know if you texted. I just texted you. Let me see if you've texted me back. Maybe you didn't, but you'll put it up in the... oh, she did already. In Virginia, she's going to do a studio day on April 21st. So you can get more info on that. Just email info@beadshop.com.
That'd be a fun one to go to.
Andrea,
Can we take time off and fly
Let's
out?
do it. Let's just fly out that Saturday.
Surprise her.
Yeah, surprise.
We'll fly out the red eye and the red eye back and just be exhausted.
It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Right, all the way across.
Take us a week to recover.
Right, totally, but so worth it. So she'll be doing that on the 21st of April, which is going to be great. And then I'm doing a little something here at my studio on Mother's Day weekend. It's going to be the 12th and 13th. We'll give you more info on that. Emily will hopefully... Yep, you're going to be there. Yep. Emily's going to be doing some like indigo dye demos. I'm going to be doing some fun like other, I don't know, stringing metal demos. But we have a couple of special guests that are joining us. One of them is our very own green girl, Cynthia Thornton. She's coming. Good. And her brother Andrew Thornton is also coming out that weekend. So it's going to be a fun open studio, and it's going to be that Saturday and Sunday, May 12th and 13th. And we'll give you more info about that as well. But it'll be a fun place to meet and greet. We'd love to see you there.
Come and hang out.
Come and hang out, watch the demos, dye some fabric. It's going to be fun. Yeah. So we'll share more information about that. And if you have project questions or whatever, bring them down. We'll be glad to help you troubleshoot. It's going to be fun. Mm-hmm. Then, last but not least, before we get started, we have our bead retreat has one last space left.
I am so looking forward to going down there for the weekend.
It's so good.
It's so beautiful. It's so quiet.
Yeah.
You won't even miss it that you don't have connection to everything. In fact,
you don't want to be connected.
You don't really want to be connected.
And it's the best of both worlds bead retreat. It's going to be the melding the worlds of wire and stringing. Yeah. And Emily and I and Janice will be there. My mama is also there, Gwen. And Gwen, I hope that my mom is at home on the other side of the computer. I know she's there. She just had a little bit of foot surgery, so she's recovering. So
feel better.
We hope that she's doing better. But my mom she's resilient, just like me.
Lady.
She'll be fine.
Yeah,
it's just a little. She
bounces back.
Yeah, just a little preventative foot surgery there. So so we'll all be there. It's going to be great, and we have so many of you are returning from last year.
Oh, I know.
We've got some new people coming, so it's a great weekend of beads and kind of bead fellowship and, I don't know, creativity and all kinds of cool stuff. So that's in San Juan Bautista, California. And as I say, we've got one space left. So if you're thinking about it, think about it. Don't delay, because you can go ahead and put your deposit down, and you can make your payments in a couple of payments, and then you won't even remember when the thing gets. And Marcia Ash just said she can't wait to share licorice with my mom. Both licorice lovers. It's great. It's great, great, great. Well, anything else? Anything you've got, Brandon, to jump in about? We're all good?
Hellos. There was a discussion about pages that happened.
Oh, yeah. I threw that in there.
Mm-hmm. Janice is right on top of answering a lot of questions.
Janice, you guys are so good. And you guys also, on the thing, we've got Gita, who is commenting as Bead Shop. We had a few issues with Gita since she was doing such a great job linking and stuff, but Facebook didn't always
put her on the
show
payroll,
her.
Right?
Well, it's not a bad idea. Facebook was marking a lot of Gita's comments as spam, so we put her over on the Bead Shop Facebook as a moderator, so she could come in and do all of her wonderful linking. So if you see beadshop.com, that's our wonderful Gita, all the way across our
country
fan from
country and an ocean and another bit of country.
That's right. We're really big in Denmark.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
It's kind of amazing. I will never get over the idea that we are worldwide at this point.
It is. We're so worldwide. We've got people
when we go to
watching us
Tucson,
from all over.
it's really cool to be in an event at Tucson, and most of them are very international. You look around and it's people from there's a booth over there with folks from China, and a booth over there with some Japanese people, and there's somebody over there from Australia with opals, and then the guy behind you from Mexico with his turquoise, and it's kind of amazing.
It's an international melting pot, that is for sure.
And it's really fun to see. And the Thai guys are over here with their silver. And
we really appreciate, Gita, all that you do on these broadcasts. We couldn't get it done without you. So, yes, beadshop.com is, Gita is posting it as Beadshop. So, it's awesome. Okay, so let's jump in and get started. Emily, this is a project that started kind of... You've been doing chunky wire for a long time. I've been doing chunky wire for a long time. But over in our Bead Shop group, beadshop.com, the bead table on Facebook, there was some great posts about heavier gauge wire and stuff like that. So we decided to take that idea and run with it. And
when I did the Wire 101 episode, I had a couple of bracelets, and I always bring samples with me, and when I brought these bracelets out, it kind of blew up, and everybody was very excited about them. It was,
right? Your bracelets just
I'm big.
Broke the internet.
I'm big on Facebook now with these bracelets.
That's right.
And they were really bracelets that I made out of pieces that I had kind of collected over time. And, Kate is an omni-crafter. I'm an omni-beater. I really love beads. And when I see
equal opportunity beater.
Yeah.
It is really true.
It's rare that I meet a bead I don't like.
It is true.
But when I collect those beads or make them myself, it's so nice to showcase them somewhere and to link them, literally, link them with other beads of their ilk that kind of stand out. And so it's really, for me, this was what that bracelet kind of worked out to be. I also really like working with chunky wire because it allows me to use simple loops. And simple loops are something I don't use very often.
No, and it's so satisfying in heavy gauge wire.
Yeah, and in the thin gauge wire, the simple loop is sometimes a failing loop. It's a loop that can open on its own, and if it gets tugged on, some 2-year-old grabs your necklace and does a chin up on it. It can be something that fails. On earrings, simple loops are most of the time kind of okay if you're working with head pins or eye pins, because they're already hardened and already stiffened.
The wire's been tempered to kind of hold its shape.
Yeah. So as you're working with bigger gauges of wire, it's a little stiffer just from the gauge of the wire itself. That
because
it's thicker. Right. But as you work with it too, you harden it by bending it and manipulating it, and that gives it enough oomph to stand up really well in this case. And to have Janice and Kate kind of give me free rein to just sort of pick out some beads and do my own thing.
We did.
Which is Janice wasn't here, and Kate said, "I'm going home," and I said, "Okay." And so they left me in possession of the bead
Emily
store.
had the keys to the kingdom.
And I just picked out what I wanted. And I did have
I
had a few things that I wanted to keep in mind, things that we had plenty of to work with, things that had enough variation to be interesting, and then also to think about this design as in something that it's going to evolve as you make it. And if you have lots of onesie twosies, that's fine. If you have multiples, that's fine too. You can have multiples in here. If you want to bend it a certain way for a color preference, or if you have one bead that's going to be kind of the showcase bead, then that'll all work out as well.
What I like to say, the say something bead.
The say something bead.
Well, shall we move the camera down and let's take a look at what we've got going on with these samples? I really like what you've done here, Emily, and I know you're going to talk a little bit about how you approach the design of this actual piece. One of the ways that I have my kind of onesie twosies or cut strands or whatever, we always say when, we buy beads a lot by the strand, and then you have a couple of those beads left over, and we call them kind of the bead orphans, or, I and I don't know how you do yours, but I have little drawers, and all of those ones and twos or half strands or whatever, I throw in by color.
We've talked about storage glancingly a couple of times. I'm going to bring my boxes in next week or the week after, next time I'm on, and show you how I kind of store my beads. But I do kind of believe in storing them by color. I worked at a bead store for many years, and all of their beads were set up in the rainbow.
Yeah, that's how we had it too at Bead Shop.
That Roy G. Biv.
When
remember that?
I do. When Bead Shop was a brick and mortar,
right?
We had all of our things laid out by color, and on our counters, we also had our loose beads kind of mixed up. They weren't really sorted by type. A lot of it. And when I had my own bead store, I did that as well. I kind of roughly had them, like if there were vintage glass or something, I kind of had that separately. But it really kind of made me do that same thing with my loose beads, that I just toss them in by color. So then when I need a blue bead, I do break them up a
little bit by material. I tend to keep my stones separate from everything else.
Yeah, I throw it all in together.
Well, and I have a jar of pearls.
Yeah,
right?
I do.
Where it's just totally mixed.
That infamous jar. Emily and
one
her
of my
jars. One of her jars. But these pieces, so talk a little bit about how the design of these evolve. You don't start at one end and then go...
I don't.
And kind of
I
little
don't go
stepping
from one
stones
end
across.
to the other.
No,
I don't. I actually make all of my pieces loose separately first.
So you make components.
Yeah.
And you can see. So let's talk a little bit about the materials.
Those guys in here too.
Yeah, the materials that you used. We've got 2 samples today that we made. One is, and I'm sorry, I don't remember
this
what
one
these
is called.
called.
Oh, sorry. This is called Silver Collector.
Okay.
Because that's kind of what we do when we collect silver. And then this is Copper Trade.
Okay.
So I love copper. I love the warmth of it. I like that it's not gold and not silver. I think it blends really well with silver.
I do.
And if you want to put gold with it, it's a little bit more subtle of a gradation. But I love copper and silver together.
Yeah.
Like, I could have used this bead over here, even though this is that silver...
and when I think about copper and silver, they're kind of like cousins in the metal world. Sterling silver, this is a silver plate. But when you're working with sterling silver is an alloy of pure silver and copper.
Right.
So it has very similar properties the way it works.
Right.
The way like if you were hammering it or if you were soldering it or whatever. So copper and sterling silver, and even in this case, this silver plate, work very similarly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I really like to make component pieces and then blend them together. And I kind of chose a variety of pieces this time. Some old, some new, some that look old. And mostly I think one of the things that brings this together for me is that the beads kind of have a similar patina to them. They are all kind of the same patina. They're sort of a soft, mostly matte patina. I also did pick beads that are roughly in volume about the same size. I think it's kind of fun to play around with contrasts myself. So having something that was a little bit big, this vase bead, which I really think are cool.
Yeah, I like those a lot.
And we have them in green too, which I didn't even think about in this.
Yeah, it's the old pottery vase.
Would have been really cool
really
there too.
Pretty.
And then I created a bead really here with the ostrich shells and those wonderful Happy Donuts. So the Happy Donuts are a little spacer, and those are just layered in between each bead. Right?
And you echoed it over here using the roller beads.
Yeah, and you know, this one actually has, because it's silver and it has a little bit more oomph and a little bit more shine to it, I kind of played around with using some more modern roller beads. The roller beads are really great because of that big hole size. So that was one of our unifying themes as well.
Yeah, and you can see these roller beads right here, if you guys aren't familiar with them, how they have such a big bead, such a big hole. And that actually, I wanted to talk a little bit about having some other smallish beads as well to kind of play around. You can see in, it's also kind of illustrated in the earring that I'm wearing here. And I'm going to show you on a piece of wire as well. But sometimes when you have a bead that has a big hole, like this guy, one of our vintage finds, if you have a bead that has a big hole that's going to kind of wiggle around on your wire, you can see in this earring that I'm wearing how I've used, you and me both know, one of my favorites, that little shadow. And see how that little shadow fits right into there, as well as this melon bead fits into there, so it stabilizes it on the wire. And so that's kind of what Emily did with these Happy Donuts. But I also like using beads that are even smaller. This is our aged Tide Pool 8/aughts, and I even have some of those 6/aughts here. And let me just show you how those go on the wire, and then Emily, you'll just jump on in. But I'm going to pull a few of these out. This is 8/aught, 6/aught, and then this is what we call our 1-shot. This is like a 2/aught, I think. It's a pretty big vintage, or not vintage check, but just check glass with kind of that Picasso finish on it. I'm going to grab a wire here just out of our wire box, totally off the cuff, and see what I've got. This is 22 gauge here, so I could use 22 gauge for this even. Emily's going to be using the 16 gauge. But if I were going to kind of do that same little thing with these, I could line these all up, and then this is our another one of our vintage finds, that jade melon.
I love those jade melons. I'm kind of thinking about making a necklace in this style.
Yeah.
And I think with the weight of the beads that I would want a centerpiece that pulls it down a little bit.
Yeah.
Kind of brings
so
that
it grounds
V
it a little.
shape into the necklace a bit.
But can you see how that 8/aught, you guys, is just sitting right in that little hole? That will keep your bead in place on the wire. And sometimes you want that. Sometimes you want a little bit more movement, which is what these roller beads have on here with these Happy Donuts. And especially since, Emily, you used a heavier gauge wire, 16 gauge, versus this smaller gauge, which is a 22. So it just depends on what the needs of your beads are on this wire.
You know, let me show you what it looks like to have a roller bead just by itself on that, even on the 16 gauge wire. It really kind of wobbles around quite a bit on the wire. And when I added the Happy Donuts, it centers the wire through the hole a bit more.
So it doesn't droop.
So it doesn't droop, you know. And even on these guys, they wobble just a little bit, right? Which that doesn't bother me particularly. And I think I can see if my 16 gauge will go through. It will. It'll go through the 6s.
So you can see how large of a hole these 6/aughts actually have. to fit on that 16 gauge wire. It's really nice.
I'm fuzzing, sorry, my sweater is lincing horribly.
It looks, but that's a really pretty, it's a really nice bead for that. Yeah. So when you're deciding about what beads you're going to be using and what gauge, you know, if you want to wrap versus doing just these simple loops, you know, test things out. Audition the beads a little bit to see how they fit around.
And you know, the Happy Donuts also helped me create some beads. So this bead I used in one sense just all alone, and this gave me a short link. But if I needed a longer link, like here at the clasp, I actually added two spacers, and that gave me a little bit more room to work with. But to me, it almost looks like a different bead. So when you have a bead that's sort of plain, throwing a spacer or cap onto the end of it really does elevate it a little bit and gives you a little something else to work with.
Yeah, and I like, it you can see it's the same bead, but it does gives it a little bit of a different look, so you're not just repeating yourself.
The beads that are here are the dappled serpentine, and I loved these beads. It was like, wait, how have I not seen these before? They really do come in a blend of colors in the package. So I'll tip this forward, Brandon, a little bit. And these were all in one package together.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
The serpentine.
I just pulled out one.
And these are called no ending.
No ending. Oh, that's the best. So here's 3 that came out of one package. Quite different. And I put a spacer on this one to make it look different. Again, it's a new bead. That's a different bead. It's not the same one that I started with. So when I make my pieces, I will bring all my links together and make them. And then assemble them as I need, and then make the clasp. That's kind of my last step. Okay.
Well, let's see how you make some of those
links.
Oh, pardon me. Excuse me. Sorry, I was trying not to sneeze. Right. But I did sneeze. And then why don't you start showing them this guy, and then I have a little kind of additional component that I'm going to share with you.
More techniques.
More techniques.
So I've got my wire working tools here right in front of me, and I'm going to use all 4 of these tools today. The wire straightener, the flush cutters, chain nose, and round nose. I don't typically use a bent chain nose all that often. Kate really likes her bent chain nose and can't live without them.
Nope, I'm a fan.
But I use just this sort of setup. You know, when I take a piece of wire from a coil to work with, the big gauges of wire are in these lovely coils. I'll cut just a foot or so to work with at a time. Otherwise, I end up cutting too many little pieces, or I'm struggling with a giant, long piece of wire. It's a little bit like the seed bead thread thing. We want enough to work with, but we don't want to make ourselves too crazy with it. So here's a piece of wire, and this is about a foot long in that neck of the woods. Now, when I cut it from the spool, I didn't really pay that much attention to how I cut it at the end. But I am going to start always with a flush cut. And this is also that reminder step that if you guys were all here in person with me in class, I would do it a couple of times to show you.
As a reminder.
Just as a reminder, because this makes the loops much nicer looking. Okay? And I'm going to take my flush cutter, and what I'd like to do is have it cross the wire on the bottom side of the flush cutter at a 90-degree angle. So I want to go straight across. It doesn't really matter where in airspace that you happen to be holding this or organizing this. Sometimes I'll do it upright like this so you can really see. And I only need to cut off the smallest amount to make sure I have that flush cut.
And we want to make sure that we are always being really mindful where that little piece of wire is going to go.
And I'm just going to put my finger on top, and I'll show you here what I cut off. It's probably even more than I needed to. I probably could have got away with half of that.
And Emily, do you usually cut? I usually try and cut with the body of the plier, not the very tip if I don't need to.
A very wise woman once told me.
I wonder who that was. Was it me?
No.
Oh well.
Sorry.
I'll tell you something wise.
Really what you want to do is when you're doing most of your stock cutting. So stock cutting would refer to cutting things where it's not an issue that you have to get in tight or close, but you're cutting kind of generalist cutting. You're maybe not making anything, but you're getting ready to. You're cutting pieces from the stock.
Right.
That you want to work in the back part of the flush cutter. All right? So I would consider that maybe halfway back and to the joint when I say back, rather than front to the tip. you save those tips for when you have to get into tight spots.
Right.
And that way, that tip stays sharp as long as possible. Flush cutters are like scissors. They do wear out over time. Some can be sharpened, some cannot. But just think about that stock cutting to happen back here, because you don't need the tip. When you have to get into a tight spot, that tip's still sharp.
That's when you use it.
Right?
Now, the other thing, I grabbed one of these guys because I did want to share this other Xeron cutter. I'm going to grab, I guess I'll just use my silver wire
silver
here.
or whatever you like.
I also love for flush cutting. And if I don't have to get into tight spots,
Stock cutting.
I use this Xeron, our memory wire plier. And the memory wire, especially if I'm using gauges that are super heavy, like this is 16, but if I went up to 14, 12, sometimes even 10 gauge, if I'm just lopping off a piece of wire like this and I come in and cut it, you can also see it gives me a super clean flush cut. And these are just a workhorse. I love these guys. So if you do have memory wire cutters, it's also a great way to do a flush cut.
For all the heavy gauges of wire, pretty much when you're going 18 and larger, so 18, 16, 14, 12, 10, you can use these cutters and they work really well.
Really well.
Because it's a bypass cutter. So you can see how the blades
It's like a little claw.
pass one another. So they tend to shear it off rather than this style, which
kind of
pinches.
squeezes it, yeah.
Right.
And something like this Xeron Maxi Shear that we're using here, this will cut confidently up to 14 gauge wire. I have cut up to 12 gauge wire with this, soft wire, right? What we don't want to do with these orange handled Maxi Shear is cut memory wire.
No.
This is not a memory wire cutter. This guy is.
Right.
Okay. So this guy here, our Xeron Maxi Shear, for all soft wires, it works really, really well.
So when I make a simple loop, and this is what I call a simple loop, just the plain circle on either end. This just, for me, differentiates it from a wrapped loop. And I did use wrapped loops in this piece for the clasp. We'll get to both of these, don't you worry.
Don't you worry.
Okay. So a simple loop for me, you can start it a couple of ways. And I find since I'm making links, one fast way to do it is to start with the P-loop method first, and then I'll make my other one to match. Now I did take time this morning, as you might notice, to mark my pliers. And with large gauges of wire, you're going to have to work up higher in the plier jaw. You're going to make a bigger loop, but the wire gauge itself is so fat that it's taking up some of the circle size. So this kind of is the happy matching of large wire and simple loops. It actually looks really great. It's super secure because the loop is big and sturdy, not going anywhere.
And if the loop on this heavy gauge wire is too small, your links aren't going to have movement. Right. This is another reason, Janice always says in stringing we need air. We also need air and movement in this bracelet, especially with this heavy gauge, and especially with units that are longer like this, right? If we had these long units here with tiny little loops, nothing would have movement.
Right. And so also, don't forget, if you were to make a whole bracelet of these long units, it's not going to make a really graceful circle, and you're probably going to need more length. This is another happy, lovely reason for working this way, is that I just build it till it fits around my wrist, and I make a clasp, and I'm kind of good to go, right? So let me show you how I do a simple loop. And just for camera view, I'm going to bend my wire a little bit so I can get a little lower and closer down to Brandwin. How are we doing, Brandwin?
Good.
Yeah? So I'm going to work right up on top of the end of this wire. And for this first loop,
and
I'm
that's
actually
the end
gonna,
that you had a flush cut.
Oh yes,
right?
I've been very careful to keep track of that. I'm just going to grasp the wire right in the jaws of the pliers, and I'm going to roll over forward. So if I turn sideways, maybe you'll be able to see very nicely. I'll do more than one of these, so don't you worry. I'm going to roll over, and I'm going to release and grip again. Now remember, grip gently here. If you don't, you'll mar your wire. I'm going to keep rolling until I can see the end of my wire pretty much touch down at that stem of this loop. All right? So to come back in here and straighten up that P loop, get it to stand upright, I'm going to put my pliers back in the loop. And here's the side view of the tips of the pliers. Can you see how one jaw, the one that's in the loop, is a little taller, a little higher up than the lower one? That is the ideal spot to then pull this wire back against the jaw, bringing in that little bend. Now I went a little far, that's all right. I go back in and straighten it up. Simple loop.
Okay. And so now it's
time for a bead.
And now that loop is centered over the top of your wire.
Absolutely. So I'm going to pick up one of these gorgeous red and white spotted trade beads. I think these beads are fantastic. They are a white heart, so the core of the bead is actually white. They layered a dark pink or red color glass over the top, and then they added white dots, right? These are called red talisman, but they are truly a trade bead. So 75, 100 years old in that neck of the woods.
Yeah, it's a beautiful bead.
It's a beautiful bead. I'm going to make my next loop using the other style of method, which is to make a bend against the bead. Okay? I would like my bead to be pretty secure in there. I'm going to turn it so that I can see to cut, and I'm going to cut off. I'm going to leave. Oh, I didn't bring the ruler over here, Kate.
Oh, do you want me to grab it for you?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yep.
I'm going to leave maybe just a little bit more than a ½ inch. So here's my question for you all. Do I need to use the tips for this cutting job right here, or can I use the back of the jaw?
You do not need to use the tips.
Thank you, Kate. It's over here.
Oh, I'm getting the...
Okay. So I'm going to cut off, leaving a flush cut on my work. That means that over here, when I use this wire again, not a flush cut. I'm going to have to actually make one. So I'm going to turn it towards me, come back with my plier, and get that mark right on the end of the wire. Let me give you a view here from my side. All right. Just holding on to the very end of the wire. And I'm going to do the same rolling over move again. Come on, behave now. Okay. Same rolling over move. Stop, loosen the grip on the plier, and roll the plier back. And continue to roll that loop forward till it touches down on the other side. Look
Why
at
is
that.
it important to have a flush cut?
So flush cuts are less scratchy. Flush cuts are a place where the plating on a wire can chip off easier. Flush cuts also allow you to grip on the very end of the wire. So if I don't have a flush cut, I have to grip further from the end to get a hold of it. I won't actually have a hold of the end of the wire. Does that make sense? Good. Now, this first link I just made for you has the loops at perpendicular orientation to themselves, to each other. Okay? So that means one loop's going this way, one loop's going this way. If I want that to look different, all I need to do is grab it and turn it. Now the loops are parallel. Okay? So I would continue with that, making those beads until I felt I had enough for my bracelet. And I might make a spare or two just to let me play around with my design. Am I picking up a pattern here? Not really. Am I free to move things around? Yes, I am. Might I want to have a shorter bead next to that longer bead? That might be a really good idea.
Yeah,
so,
because
for bendability.
For bendability, exactly,
yeah,
for movement.
Circleability. So I think I might want to do another king size shadow in here. These are the antique copper king size shadows.
I love those.
Could have used a bright copper one too, but I like the antique copper. Have we polished on these a little bit with a pro polish pad either? It might be kind of fun to do to kind of brighten up the corners and the edges, just for, again, variety of is the spice of life. So here's my wire, and it has a non-flush cut on the end. It's extremely scratchy and rough, and I'm going to cut it off. And again, all I need to cut off is the non-flush part. right? Just the part. So now I have a blunt end to work with, and it's much cleaner, looks much better overall, all to the good. So I'm going to grab a hold of that end, wind around, keep winding until I see it touch underneath. That makes a P-shaped loop, or a Q from your side. Plier goes back in, and I'm going to pull the wire against the outside jaw of the plier. Now, here's a good point, as Kate has schooled you well on this. Simple loops are a little bit like jump rings. They're either closed or they're not.
Open, yes.
So this one is showing a little gap of air here, and that little gap is going to get dealt with when we link them together. I don't need, if I've made a beautiful loop, I don't need to muck with it now. I can do that in a minute. Okay. I'm going to slide my bead on all the way down to the loop. I'm going to bend my wire over the top of the bead.
And with that heavy gauge, especially since that's a metal bead, you can kind of use the metal bead to help you bend that wire, right? You kind of move them both at the same time.
And this is what I wanted to measure for you. I'm measuring, you know, from just about from the bend on to the tip to where I'm about to cut, a little more than a ½ inch. Okay. I'm going to cut that off. And I tend to turn it towards me so that I can roll away from me, but you can do whatever makes you comfortable. I'm going to grab a hold of the very end of the wire. If there's any sticking out here, that's going to mess up my measurement. So I really want to be on the very, very end of that wire. Here's where having a flush cut makes me sure that I'm on the very end of the wire. You almost want to be so close you fall off.
Yeah.
Right?
Right at the tip.
Wrapping over, stop, loosen, roll my plier back, go forward again till it touches down. Air, a little air there, I can go back in and do another little maneuver. A little roll there to get it squared up. Okay. So pretty good on the measurement, if I do say so myself.
Yeah,
not too bad. Let me tell you another little secret. When you're wire wrapping or making loops in your wire and links, you are hyper focused on the size of those loops. Once you get this all put together, some small differences in your loop size are not going to show. I promise you.
Make much of a difference.
Right? So to connect all this together is a simple matter. I'm actually going to start with this bead because I'm going to add a clasp at the end. I like to open my loop the way we do a jump ring by swinging it across the opening. So I'm moving the loop out of plane a little bit, putting another loop on, swinging it closed, and that's where I get to deal with that little bit of gap if I have one. Okay? So now my links are closed. I'm using chain nose pliers for this, not round nose. It's super tempting to use one plier for everything, but if you do that, you will make dents on your wire with your round nose plier. I promise.
Your round nose is your looper. Your
it's the
chain nose
plier
is your
for
gripper.
the making the loops. Chain nose does everything else. All right? So this linking and bending does good things for my wire because it helps work harden it, makes it stiffer and less likely to unloop. Oops, I need to open a little bit more. Does it matter which loop on each link that you open? Not at all. Does it really matter if your loops are in plane to one another? Not so much. You can have a little bit of out of plane loops if you needed to. Any questions I should be working on, Brandwin?
No, it's looking good so far, Em.
Cool.
I think
I hope I helped you with your simple loops.
yeah,
I really do.
that's good.
That's kind of coming along.
Yeah. So while you're putting those together, I'm going to share a little bit about what I've got going on over here.
Show me what you... Oh, Kate's doing some fun things.
Yeah. So, with this simple looping that Emily's doing, we also have I'm going to steal a couple of your, where are your components? Oh, you put them together. You looped them all together.
You can have
I'll
that
take
guy.
one there.
Okay.
So you can see I've also pulled in some other beads that you can use as a possibility. These are our Ashanti saucers, okay? So something like this you could use up through the bead hole, which I'll make a little unit right now here and get it down there. So this Ashanti saucer, we could pile up some Happy Donuts. We could throw in that saucer, put a couple more on. And this would also make a great little unit. So I'll go ahead and make that into, sometimes I use my chain nose plier to help me bend, though I've got a little too much space there, so I'm going to unbend it or straighten it as it were and get that in there just a little bit tighter if I can. Sometimes this 16 gauge, it's a little hard sometimes on your hand to bend, so I use my chain nose a lot to help me move it around. So again, I'm going to leave about a half an inch or so for my loop going up and over. And you can also, if you don't have a super clean flush cutter, you can get, where did I put it? I just had it here a second ago. A little emery file.
You have it in your hand right there.
No, it's this one, but I had a smaller one.
Oh.
Here we go. And get a little emery board, and I can give that just a little
tidying.
You can also do that with sandpaper, but this is just a little emery board, and it gives you a nice clean edge.
It does. And I would do that if I was making ear wires.
For sure, with
any of
wires.
those kind of things. Yep.
Now, I, like Emily, like to roll my wires up and over the top, so I'm going to do that. So you can see this little Ashanti saucer. There we go.
That's such a nice
really
bead.
Looks nice.
Oh, it really blends in there well.
Yeah,
it kind of
it
takes
does.
the place of this kind of green one here.
So I'm going to get both of my loops going in the same plane for this one. So now I've got this guy going on here, that little guy. But you can also use it flat, and you can see I've done a couple of things here, and I want to show you how this is done, because this also makes a great earring component wrap. Now, normally I might use a little bit of a thinner gauge, especially if I were using a smaller bead to do this with, but I chose 20 gauge to kind of go with this 16 gauge as well. If I did this wrap with the 16 gauge, it would be just too
bulky.
Heavy, right? Too much of a heavy gauge. So I'm gonna get, I don't know, maybe a, I don't know, 3-inch piece, maybe.
You know what I like to use
wire.
this technique for? Buttons.
Yeah, buttons do really well with this.
Yeah, so any buttons with a hole.
Because you could put that right through. It would look great. So there's my, I don't know, how many inches did I cut? 3 inches? 3.5 inches it looks about. And I'm going to grab my saucer, and I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put that wire through the center, and I'm going to go about 1/4 of the wire here to about 3/4 of the wire over here. And I'm going to bend this up. Now, some of you may remember when I do a bracelet wrap, this is really very, very similar to that. I'm going to come in with one side of this wire, or I can squeeze it together like this, but I'm going to do this with just one side, and I'm going to pull this in. So can you see how this side of the wire is kind of curving itself up onto the Ashanti disc? Now I'm going to take my short piece of wire and I'm going to bend it across at a right angle. And that's my wrapping wire. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this wire. I can hold it with my fingers or my plier, but I'm going to wrap it from the top of this saucer up the wire. And I'm going to do this in, my default is usually about 3 wraps. But it just depends on what you like. You can have a longer or shorter series of wraps. See how when I wrapped that, you guys, I was just holding onto the wire and I twisted the saucer around.
Yep.
Which was kind of cool. Now, this is where Emily was saying about getting that tip of the wire cutter in there. See how the tip of the cutter is right there? It's really getting up there nice and close. I'm going to clip, leaving just the tiniest little bit of wire left, and I'm going to use my bent chain to push that down. Now, this component now has all kinds of possibilities. This could become an earring, like if I got another one of these little dotted white hearts here. And I threw this on. Yeah, that red talisman, isn't that cool?
Yeah,
then I could
really
make a loop and make a great earring for that, right?
Top.
I could do one of those. So notice how the hole is covering up my wire wraps. So I'm going to go ahead and use one of those happy donuts. Let's see if that happy donut, that should stop at the wrapping, and it does. Right? And I could put another one. I don't know, you want to put that guy on?
I do.
Let's do it.
I think it needs it.
Okay.
Needs a hat.
So something like that. And I could come in and just make my loop. And I would have an earring. So I can go ahead and I can do that. Then I want to show you. And again, that's about, I don't know, maybe a little smaller than a ½ inch. Then up and over the top. Okay. So now I went a little too far. There we go. So something like that guy. Now, we can also make a component that has two sides to this, right? So we could use this in our bracelet this way. So let me show you how I do that side. I'll go ahead, I'll get another Ashanti Sosa out of my bag. And these are a sand cast bead, also an African bead. I love them.
I really like their colors.
So.
They really are a good blender. I mean, this kind of khaki color or kind of army green, olive drab kind of color is really pretty. And it has a shine to it, but it's not sparkly shiny.
And these are a traditional West African bead. They're really, I think, really gorgeous. So I'm going to come back through. I'll do this again. I'll do it a little bit faster. I'm going to pull that wire in at the side to conform it at the side of my donut. Bring this around and wire wrap it. And I'm going to go for maybe 2 wraps on this one just for fun to mix it up a little bit. And I'll come in and cut away my extra. Now at this point I can come in and I'll just make a loop. Push that in there. Now the loop, I'm going to come in and make my bend so I can cut my wire away. But if you'll notice, can you see here how that loop is doubled over? Sometimes I do that little doubled over loop because I like the way it looks. It'll be a closed loop, so I'm going to have to connect it to something that opens, like this one. But I do this doubled loop a lot. And sometimes, if I'm doing this and it's at the top of a pendant, I'll do the double loop, and I'll use my little ruler here.
Split it open, get a double
split it
bail.
open, so it's like, yeah, it's like a little bail. And I just come in with one side of my plier this way, one side of my plier that way, and you can see, let me straighten this out a little bit. Okay, so you can see that's a little, like a little bail, and I could put cord through it that way. But this, what I do is, I cut, to make that doubled loop, I'm going to cut about 1 inch, or cut leaving about 1 inch of wire. And again, it's kind of arbitrary, but I'm going to go about that same place that Emily had for her
about
loop.
almost 3/4 there.
And I'm just going to see how I'm rolling it up like a little coil.
Can I stop you right there before you finish? So one thing that's important, I think, in this technique with Kate is that she's actually working with the open end towards the small end of the pliers. So as she builds up the loop, it sort of feeds itself off that direction. If you go this way, you're going to end up with a bigger loop that's not going to ever be the same.
Right. And so you can see, I'm going to curve it. Whoops. I just made that not so pretty. I'm going to curve it around, and then you can see how now that doubled loop, the end of that loop stops right at the wire wrap there. And then you just repeat on the other side to make I don't know what happened to it. I slid it somewhere. To make that loop. Now to connect these, again, we'd have to connect it with a loop that opens and closes. So let me actually close up this little bail to make it a double loop again. And you can see on this one, let me show you, on this loop. This loop size I made a little bit smaller, and notice how my loop is coming up again here. I really want it to stop right there. So I'm just going to come in with my wire cutter. I'm going to clip that extra away.
Yep.
And no one is the wiser. Yeah. So this would just open my 16 gauge. Again, I like opening with my bent chain to really get a good handle on it. And I want to grab this loop like I mean it. I don't want to grab it with the end of these pliers because it won't grab and it'll nick your wire. So really get a firm grip on it, lift, put your component on like Emily showed you earlier, and push it right back in. So again, in order to connect these guys, they need to have an opening and closing loop to connect. Whoops. See, I didn't have a good grip. That's what happens. Get a firm grip on there and push that wire down. So you can see how we've got how you could use discs. Or you can see I also started to do it on this little, our little recycled glass beads.
Oh, those are so pretty.
The center of the hole, but I did it the same way as I did this one.
The currants, I really like them. That's what these are too. These are black currants, which not to be confused with black raspberries, but these are black currants, and they're a little smaller and they're a little bit rounder, I think, than the other currants, just as a grouping. So I was reading comments as we were going along, and I was seeing that there was some discomfort with trimming your wires. So let me show you something. Let's just say that this is, I want to make a matching loop on the other side, right? And let's say I come in here and I go, okay, that looks about right to me, right? I'm going to cut that off. I'm going to work right there. So I grab a hold of the end of it with my plier.
Line it up with your little Sharpie mark.
Line it up with my little Sharpie mark, which is beginning to wear off already. And I start rolling along. And I roll along and I go, uh-oh.
Uh-oh, that's not right.
That's not right. I wanted my loop way over here. And if I open that up and make a loop, it's going to be really big. So
all you do is you fearlessly cut.
I'm gonna just give it a little haircut.
Yeah, give it a guess.
Right?
And the more you do this, the more you'll be able to visualize how much you need to cut away.
Yeah. And
perfectly done, Emily.
Mine are almost never perfect. If you were to measure them, but that came out pretty good.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
It's great.
So I just lopped off a little bit. And will anyone ever know that you did that? No.
Nope.
For sure.
Not at all. So, Em, why don't you start talking about your clasp?
Okay.
Because the clasp is super cool.
You know, when you're ready to end it all, it's time for a clasp. I'm
That's
just
right.
kidding, guys. All right? Brandon at least laughed. I know that the length of bracelet I have here is not long enough.
Let's give it a measure, just so people can see.
Door to door?
Door to door. So our finished one, this one, you made it to kind of fit your wrist.
And I have kind of a big wrist, guys. I like about an 8-inch bracelet.
Yeah, so this is about 8 1/4
Yeah.
door to door. And it depends, and you do need, when this comes around, I'm actually going to put this on you. So when it comes around like this, you can see that we've got that room, that kind of fingertip room there. And it does need to be a little bit larger because you've got these bigger chunky beads. They take up more space. So what's your finish? What's your wrist size? Do you mind if I measure it?
I usually figure that I have about an 8-inch wrist.
About an 8-inch wrist. So
if you measure my wrist, it's going to be 7 inches. And that'll give you, then I add about 3/4 to an inch for what I call ease. So it's sort of like air. But it's ease.
So with your 7-inch wrist, this like 8 1/4 with the chunky beads,
makes sense. Yeah.
Now, a place that you could also kind of adjust your length would be in how long you make this hook.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah, I actually really kind of like a fairly good sized hook here. The bigger the better, in fact, because it's easier to manipulate. And then I also made a wrapped loop at this end on the clasp end, right? If you were stuck and wanted to put this on a much smaller wrist, you could actually shrink it down and go down here and lop that guy off, and you'd be fine. If you're making this for someone and you're not sure of their wrist size, you're going to have to fit it on them when you see them.
And you could always finish off with a little spiral or a little something there.
Yeah,
because then it could just be a little dangle. Well, show us how that clasp is made.
Okay. So I like making my own clasps.
I do too.
At a certain point in my life, I had the keys to many bead stores, and so if I had to have a clasp in the middle of the night, I probably could have managed it, but I wasn't supposed to. But really, it's not a bead emergency. All I want to do is make a clasp out of this piece of wire. Now, what's also kind of fun to think about is not only is this really the directions for making a clasp, but it does also fall in the directions for making an ear wire, because really they're kind of the same thing, just two different sizes and a few modifications. So I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers to start with, and I'm going to grip. I'm down from the end of the wire, maybe almost 3 inches, all right? And I've got a piece of wire here that's maybe 7 inches long.
And you're still using the 16 gauge wire.
I am, and this is the same piece of wire I started with today for class. So I'm going to make a bend in the wire, and I'm going to bend it right along the jaw of the tool, okay? Till I get kind of a corner. And here's where I'm going to use my fingertips just a bit to bring those two wires together. Just do your best here. Doesn't have to be perfect, okay? Now I'm going to take my chain nose pliers, and I'm going to do a revolutionary thing. I'm actually going to use them to squish together these two long pieces of wire. And that end is the open part of the clasp.
Yeah, you can see it's that bit of the hook.
Yep, right there.
Just right there.
Right? So the better job I do here, the nicer job I do, the more I'm going to like it. I want them to be pretty close together. Right?
Nice and closed.
Nice and closed. So this doubles up 16 gauge, giving me a real sturdy clasp. I'm going to grab my round nose pliers again, and I'm going to use the largest part that I can in the jaw of the tool. Okay? I'm going to wind that wire around that large jaw to form a hook. How about that? How about them apples?
That looks perfect.
Right?
I like the looks of that loop.
Good. I'm going to take my chain nose pliers again, so changing back and forth here quite rapidly, and I'm going to hold the two wires together. Now here's another thing to think about with chain nose pliers. If I'm gripping at the tip of the plier, I'm having to exert the most amount of force with my hand. If I move back in the jaws some, I'm actually expending a little less energy to hold on to that wire.
So the grip is lighter, and you are going to mark your wire much less.
I'm going to bend that wire up, and I'm going to wrap it around the long wire. I also have a feel for 3 or so wraps, like Kate does. So there's a little bit of a tail left over. I'm going to flush cut the end off, making sure it doesn't go flying. You know, when there's more people in a room, we are very militant about that flying wire.
Yeah, you need to be very careful.
You need to be very mindful so that you don't poke yourself first or your neighbor.
Or your neighbor.
Right?
That's right.
So let's grab a bead. And I think I'm going to pick
any
up
bead.
a bead, any bead. Now on the other side here, I can just make a simple loop. The bending over process is pretty easy to do with this soft wire. If I was using 16 gauge half hard wire, it would be much more difficult. But one of the things I like to think about is I'm supporting the loop from below, I'm pinching the bead, and I'm actually kind of moving my hands apart. Watch how they separate. So my hands are moving this way. Both hands are involved in that process.
It lets you have a little more oomph behind
a little more leverage. Yep.
And also, Emily, I'm noticing that you're a little more mindful. For a clasp, I'm usually a little more mindful about where the loop is going to go.
I don't really care.
Versus, no. I do.
I'll figure it out. Well, I can figure it out later.
You can.
I can make adjustments.
You can.
Right? Look around. and around, so that loop fits in. Okay?
Looks great.
So the thing about clasps and the loops of clasps is you basically have to have kind of an odd number of dimensions or directions. So on this particular one, you'll see that my clasp and the loop to my clasp are at perpendicular to one another, and then that means my loop is also going to be perpendicular. So odd number of connections, 1, 2, 3, right? And that one needs to be perpendicular. It wouldn't actually work if it was this way, right? So it's okay. It could be either way on this at this point, and I can just turn my loop. Hi there. Now you're perpendicular or parallel. And I have the rest of my pieces that I made today. So I could actually put this clasp at either end, right? But since I'm going to use that red talisman, I think I'm going to put it down at this end, so it kind of breaks up. You know, I used to think of, I remember when I first started beading, I would actually save the best beads for later. Why, I don't know why I did that, but that was sort of, that was just kind of the way I thought about it, you know? And so I somewhat think of this as spending your beads, is how you choose to lay them out. I want to spend beads that are more colorful or maybe more unusual, kind of evenly across this piece. And I do have a little pattern that developed here, right? But I could break that up again. I can still change it right now if I want to. So here's my clasp to attach.
Yay. Look at that. And see how Emily just flipped that over and let gravity kind of pull that strand out of the way?
Keep it in place. Right? So if I compare this to my other bracelet in length, I think we're kind of getting there. I still need one more little link. So this would be a place where I'd actually maybe look at building a bead that's just the right size. So I could use one of these king shadows, but I've got 2 in there already. So I think maybe the answer is to build one with a few Happy Donuts and ostrich shell. So it's going to be a little bit shorter bead link here. Ooh, and I'm out of wire, so I got to get a new piece of wire. I know. It's getting there, isn't it?
Cut another piece of wire.
Cut another piece of wire? Who knew?
And so a question that Kathy had that we can address while you're doing that. Do you have an issue with the hook coming off of the loop?
I don't once it's on my wrist. It's a little bit like a toggle.
Well, and because you've curved this, if you really look, Kathy and everyone, you've really curved that down. So it's not, you know, it's not like a U like this. It's coming in, so that
once it gets connected, I'm golden. Yep. So let's do one more. And this time I'm going to do a wrap loop to kind of match up with the wraps on the other side. So I'm going to do the simple loop to start off with, and then I'll make a bead by stacking on that little grouping of ostrich shell. Another one of my loves.
Yeah, I love these.
I love the fact that how those are made is the way they've been making beads for eons. You know,
they're so cool.
They're really, really cool. And they're textural, and each one's a little different. And I just adore them. Right? So I stacked 5. In this case, I guess I'm kind of a symmetrical person, that I feel like it needs to be symmetrical, but it could not be symmetrical as well. Right?
Yeah, and that looks like just the right size.
Just about the right size, right?
Now, while you're doing that, there's been a couple of questions about, you know, whether the wire is half hard or dead soft or whatever. And one of the things with this 16 gauge, Emily really is making it look super easy. She's really pulling that wire right around. But also notice how when she is wrapping, like she's doing now, she's really kind of using, not only is she moving her wrapping hand, but she's moving this hand a little bit too to kind of help her have a little more leverage.
I'm definitely using both hands. So here's a place where I'd want to get in, and I want to be careful. I don't want to damage that loop. I want to get in there and clip off with the tips. I'm going to press down that little end.
And just by default, the 16 gauge wire, even if it's dead soft, is going to be pretty stiff. So it's going to feel a little funny to you guys if you've been used to working with even 20 gauge. It will have a little bit of a different feel. So try and use both hands as you're working.
That's pretty close. So this came out just about, what, a 1/4 inch long?
So you can just open that loop and make the loop a little bit
more.
Yeah. There you go.
Would anybody know that I had to go back in there and do a little fiddle?
I would know.
Well, shut it, Richard.
I won't tell, I promise.
All right.
Looks good.
Yeah, kind of fun, huh?
Yeah, looks great. And I really like the way that when you do a clasp like this, that the bead is integrated. So it's really hard to see where the piece is clasped once it's on.
And you know, this is really the most simple of making all your own pieces. It can get much more complex from here. One of those things we could have done with the Ashantis. Can I borrow one from here?
Take.
So I sometimes incorporate buttons into my work. And with an Ashanti, these have variable sizes of holes, as do all trade beads and sand cast beads especially. But we could have actually made a simple loop that would incorporate here and a simple loop that would incorporate here. So it would actually look like that bead was a solid loop connecting something else. And that's a cool way to use a bead like that.
So if you were making, let's just make it.
Should I do it?
Yeah, let's just
All right.
illustrate it, because I love like a big loop, especially if you're using 16 gauge. It would be it would work for it, I think.
I think that's probably, this is at the max
Yeah.
of my plier.
And we could even use something like I could use, I don't know, I could use my pen.
Yeah, I got it, I think. And I really had to open up that loop a bunch to get that on there. Yeah, it's not quite big enough. You might have to do it with your pen. So see how it doesn't quite fit in here? It's close though. You know what might work for that is those brass circles. What are those called? Circle of brass? The kind of...
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
that would be
work.
nice. So see, I just use my pen as you use a knitting needle, whatever, as my mandrel. I could come in and see, since it's over.
Yeah.
I'll just cut that extra away.
Kate's cutting with the flush cutter towards the thing she's making at this point.
Right, so this end's going to be flush. I'll clip it, and now I'll close it up. It also may be a little too big. I may have made it a little
I don't
bit
think
big,
so.
but let's see, because you need room for that to work. There we go. And this 16 gauge is perfect with that. And again, this might be, I think it might be just slightly too big. So I'm going to take it off. Clip, doing that same little trick that Emily did earlier. Clip.
Who would ever know? Anyone? Nope.
No one.
Who's
Then I'm
going to
going to
know?
close
Nobody?
it.
Nobody.
And then we're just going to bring it around so it closes. Now, this loop also might benefit from being a little bit elongated. So I'm going to shape it a little bit with my pliers so it's a little more like a teardrop or an oval shape and a little less round. I'll put that Ashanti on there and then we'll close it up. And see how that flush cut, that's another reason for a flush cut. See that flush cut, there's no little pinch at the end, so it really sits flush against that main wire. Okay, can you see that? So this, then you would just put a bead on here, Em, right?
Yeah. Actually, I would do this. I would do another one of those on the other side.
Right, and then one on the other side, but I would go ahead and I would put...
Do you still have your little scratch paper? Can I borrow it for a second?
I do, it's right here.
Thanks.
There you go.
Okay.
So something like this can go on, and then I would bend, and then I'd make this loop, I don't know, a little bit smaller. Notice how I cut that and threw my wire across the
Did you?
table. I did. Bam. And like this. And again, I'll use my straight or my bent chain. And my straight chain, I like in this configuration to have my loops going the same way. So you can see there's half of that connection there.
So I know it's hard to see on the internet sometimes what we're talking about pinched off ends or ends of the wire, a flush cut end. So the flush cutter, if it passes across the wire at 90 degrees, leaves one end blunt and one end not blunt. Because of the way it works, it pinches it off. That memory wire cutter of Kate's she had out, this works more like a scissor. And that's why you get two blunt cuts, or a very clean blunt cut. So this is actually what the wire looks like, that pointed, scratchy end, and a place where the plating can begin to chip a little bit. Just wanted to make sure everybody caught that after I had a moment to look through the comments again.
And the way that I use, like you could use, some people have mentioned using a bail making plier, which are two pliers that have
big loops,
big jaws. They might be different sizes, but they're the same size all the way around. But again, you could use a knitting needle. We could use our beloved awl right here. I could use that. And the way I start then, I just use this as my jig, really, as my form, and see how I make that loop around it, and then I pull that out. Then now I'm able to come in. I'll cut this length. I'll do that little trick that Emily did earlier by grabbing this and taking it from a P to a centered loop, right? And then I'll come in. I could even at this point do a little elongating if I felt like I needed to. And then I'll cut away. Come in with the flush side of the cutter, pointing towards the usable side of the loop, clipping it away, making everything go back into shape. And now let's open this up and put this on the other side. And again, if it's a little big, but it looks like almost the same size. You can see when I hold it up like that, this loop is just a hair larger, so no big. I'm going to come in, cut that extra loop, that extra amount away, and I look. And this really, the more that you kind of play around with your wire, you guys, the more you're going to be able. I know Emily and I make it look super easy because we've been working with wire for 25 years.
Not my first clasp. Not my first loop.
No, not your first loop. And, you know, I took a class on this last Saturday when we were at Stitches. I took a class on trying to learn how to knit continental because I'm a thrower. I knit traditional throwing style.
On how to make jogless stripes.
I did. And the continental, I went from holding the yarn in my right hand to holding my yarn in my left hand. And it was difficult. You know, I, kept trying to, go at it and trying to get the feel of it and stuff. And, I'm going to have to probably knit a whole scarf, at least, continental style, before my hands have that muscle memory. So this is the same thing with wire. And notice here how I made my loops open at the bottom, at the same side. So if this were the top of my piece here, I'd have an unbroken section there. So there's a lot of ways, a lot of things that you could do to create these wire components. You just have to kind of give yourself the permission to say, you know what, I'm not going to worry about whether or not this component is amazing. I'm just going to come in and I'm going to start creating with wire. And a heavy gauge is pretty awesome to work with. Again, your hands do have to be strong, but my hands, I'm working this left hand as I'm holding the bead, my right hand as I'm holding the plier, and I'm working them against each other.
In tandem.
So I've got that that movement.
Well, the whole point of pliers, in fact, the whole point of a handle on a tool, is to give you more.
It's a pretty loop.
It's a really pretty one. The whole point of that is to give you more control and to give you more strength. I could no sooner make these tiny loops barehanded without a plier or fly to the moon, although I'd really like to go to the moon. So you need to use a plier, and the plier does give you better grip. Definitely when I'm working, I'm pulling one hand that moves against the other, and they're holding and bracing for one another as they go along. I do think some of this, and Kate will probably agree with me, I think that the more you do, the more familiar it feels, the better. As you're first starting out, everything feels a little unfamiliar.
Right.
And like you're rubbing your head and patting your tummy when you're trying to do something.
Feels a little goofy.
Feels a little goofy. So practicing or making some things, doing something every day, gives you more confidence, and it gives you more dexterity and more familiarity. Really, that's a big part of it.
Yeah, practice, just like I'm going to...
Leverage torque, says Janice.
That's right.
Janice Kang is there.
Just like I'm going to practice with that continental knitting.
Well, you know, I tell this story a lot in my classes when people talk about practice, that I remember as a very young kid watching my mom make pancakes. And I'm the youngest of 5, so there was a lot of pancakes that came along before me. But I would watch my mom make pancakes, and she could literally make pancakes without burning the first half dozen.
Incredible.
And it was really because she had just learned how to watch for the signs and experienced a bunch of pancakes beforehand. So, not my first pancake right there.
Right there. That's
Done
right.
a few.
That's right. Done a few.
Yeah.
Flipped a few of those.
Yep.
Well, let's, I think it's great. I think, judging by what you guys are saying, that you are digging this technique, which is great.
Yeah,
Great.
I like it too.
Yeah, English cuts would really work with this as well. Someone was mentioning the larger English cuts would work. I think
it would. I think you might have to move to 18 gauge.
18 gauge maybe.
But you could still get this effect with 18 gauge for sure.
Yeah, it's good. Well, let's move this camera around, Bran, and we'll talk a little bit about, we've had some questions about what we're wearing, so we'll share that. And we'll bring this episode to a close. So, I had a couple of questions about the ring I was wearing.
Oh, your enamel ring is so marvelous.
You know me, I like a say something ring, a
you
statement ring.
You like that red and blue together. Every time I see it together, I think of you.
I do. This is a piece that I just did some torch enameling with and did a little bezeled turquoise piece.
Right on it, yeah. Everybody's been seeing it.
No problem. It's a little bit of a split shank. It's kind of a fun little piece. It's a class that I teach. And then this earring, I showed it earlier, just very briefly. This is from, we did this piece on an episode of Beads, Baubles, and Jewels. We'll link to it because I think it aired a few weeks ago.
And that's a wood carved bead. That's so pretty.
Yeah, it's a serpentine.
Yeah.
But what do we call it?
I think it's called wood carved.
Wood carved.
I believe so. Yep.
Yeah, it's a fun one. And so that was our piece there. And Em, you have kind of a mixed media piece that you made of metal clay, which is kind of awesome.
I haven't worn a lot of metal clay to our Wednesday events.
Yeah, metal clay is good.
I've been kind of thinking about it a lot. I've got a private lesson coming up next Monday. So this is a piece that I made a few years ago that has a metal clay box that I built for it. And then some riveting. Riveting with a little tiny nut and bolt here. And then riveting with what's called a staple back here. And I'll flip them over so you can see what the back side looks like.
And the riveting, we're going to get into a little more of this type of metal work where we do some rivets and things. We're testing out a couple of hole
Heavy
punches.
gauge wire again.
Yeah, that we like. And making rivets is so simple.
It's simple and it's incredibly satisfying to join two things together without having to use heat. So if you have different types of materials, like this is an antique watch face with an enameled front, a silver dime, and a ceramic face, to join all those things together with heat, it could be done, but it would be very tricky.
Yeah. Maybe you could do it. I don't think I could do it.
So to use cold connections, rivets, it's really fascinating. So this is just the wire that comes through the hole of the little face pendant, and then as it comes up, I clipped off. Talk about wanting to cut correctly the first time, and I folded it over. You know,
to create a little closure.
If you look at how a staple works, you know, when they come out of the staple, hold the top of the staple, there are 2 points picking down, and then it hits the bottom, and that curls them around. Same idea. Yeah.
And it's a really good cold connection. And riveting is one of the first metalworking techniques that I learned how to do, and I think it's a really valuable one. So you guys will we'll be having some more of these cold connection.
Absolutely.
Riveting is so empowering.
Yeah, and you can rivet with
great.
leather. You can rivet with a bunch of things.
Got a request for a close up of.
Oh yeah, and we'll put this in the our little rug hooked pieces. We'll put the link to them in the episode notes.
Yes, that's how it was supposed to go. Mine has a little heart, but it's a little lumpy.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about it at the beginning of the broadcast, so you can go back in and take a look at that.
And this really was such a satisfying technique.
Yeah, it's a fun little thing
I don't know.
to do.
I suppose I could incorporate beads in there one way or the other.
Yeah, we could totally bead on this, or at least put a statement bead. I don't know, some Ashanti in there maybe.
Maybe. You never know.
Might look kind of cool. But anyway, well, before we part ways, we've got a couple of things.
Today?
Yeah, let me get our little thing. So we thought it would be fun to share some of these Ashanti saucers. So our Ashanti saucers come in a lot of different colors. A lot of different colors. We've got a few even that we don't have up here. We've got these blue ones. We've got some ivory ones. So we thought that would be a fun giveaway today.
Yeah, we want you to play around with these a little bit.
We want you to play around. So they come in packages of 10, these guys. And if you place your order, today is the 28th of February, and last day of February, and if you place your order before 1 o'clock Pacific time, it's about noon here, so in the next hour after this broadcast, and you write saucers please in your shipping notes before you check out, we will send you a bag of Ashanti saucers, and we're going to choose the color for you. So we're going to toss, we have a variety of colors, so we'll toss one in your bag.
Great
and you
for
can experiment with it.
You can build a bead out of this.
Yeah, they're really great.
Really fun to use.
Yeah.
You can do bead embroidery, which is coming. I know
all you guys want to bead embroidery.
Don't worry, I brought my stuff today, so we're going to talk about it.
Yes, we have a little Facebook special today. If you toss Treasure 15 in the coupon code box, you'll get 15% off for your order. And that store-wide sale, again, ends tonight, 2/28/2018. Now, if you're watching this later on the rebroadcast or on our YouTube channel or later on and you've missed this discount or this giveaway, make sure that you go over to our website, beadshop.com, and sign up for our newsletters. That is our main source of discounts and giveaways, and you can rest assured that your information always stays private with us. We don't sell it or give it away.
Loan it or do anything with it.
So, but you'll be aware of all of our specials and sales and stuff like that. So, and the saucer, the bag, I think there's 10 in the bag here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Yep, they come in a bag of 10. So that's what we'll be
Several
tossing
pairs of earrings.
Yep. So that's our story, and I am sticking to it. I know you're sticking to it.
I am.
That's it. Next week, you guys,
JP!
Janice is coming back, and we have... she'll be back for a visit. We have really amazing pieces. We'll do a little sneak peek. We'll toss a couple pictures up on the Bead Shop page and in the group so you guys can see that. It's a project that we're calling Trails End, and it mixes up leather and beads and wax linen. It's a great Janice style piece. And then we've got some fun things coming up the rest of March. I'm doing kind of a little treasure bottle necklace piece. It's really cool. And then this Saturday, you and I and Janice are sitting down and
we're having a powwow,
planning more of our Facebook Lives. Yeah. So we're going to have some really fun things. A lot more wire, some metal working. We've got some great new components to work with leather. We've got a great new cord coming up. So there's so
on leather
much.
Too.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got some. I can see them sitting right over there. We've got some cool stuff. So so those will be coming up. So we'll keep you guys updated about what's shaking. On Friday, for once, I do know what I'm doing on Free Tip Friday this week.
You kind of know anyway.
I do. Well,
you do.
You give me the benefit of the doubt. No, I don't.
I think you do a lot of times. Well,
sometimes
I think it's unconscious, but I think you have a plan.
Maybe, but but this Friday I really have a plan. I'm going to share some hammering with you. We're going to take kind of this a little bit further and do some hammering. I'm going to share with you a hammered clasp and a hammered component that I use. So on Free Tip Friday, that'll be Friday at 10:30 Pacific time. So we'll have a little link to that up later today on the homepage to the blog, but we'll actually have the finished project and everything up there on Friday.
I like that clasp too.
Yeah, it's a good clasp. So I think it'll be fun. So that's our story. We're sticking to it, right? All right, looks good. Okay, well, I will see you guys on Wednesday. Emily will be with us too, but Janice will be winging her way to this coast, doing some moderating. Yep, doing some typing.
Thank you, Gita, for being there in advance.
Yes, we really appreciate it, and great job, Brandon, on the camera work. It was awesome, and we will see you guys. I'll see you on Friday, and we'll see you next week. That's it. All right,
we're out.
We're out. See you guys soon. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.